an effort. This is a new effort for us to focus some energy around child nutrition. And it's kind of new and it's kind of not. I mean, Results has a long history of working on child survival issues. We really initiated the child survival revolution with UNICEF many years ago. It was one of our first campaigns, and we've continued to work on it over a period of time. But we are going to actually do some more focused work on child nutrition, because what we know and what we're going to learn tonight is that there are some very simple interventions that we can make.
Heidi.
Hello, Heidi. There are some very simple interventions we can make in the area of child nutrition. And this is different than just childhood having enough, children having enough to eat, but childhood nutrition that can save a lot of kids' lives and actually enhance their development, allow them to develop naturally, both brain and body, that can lead them to having really productive lives. So the challenge in what we're doing right now is that we've got a moment in time in June 8th, that is very important for us as a pledging opportunity that we want the United States to take advantage of on June 8th. And leading up to that, we're going to want to engage the grassroots in generating some media, and then also some support via a sign-on letter and perhaps some other mechanisms to encourage the administration to do something bold at this conference. So right now, this is a real kickoff to so that we start to learn a bit more about the details and the facts behind good nutrition work and what our interventions need to look like in order for them to be effective. And we've brought on board with us Melanie Vance. Melanie worked with Action in the past. She's worked with the Obama campaign. She's doing some consulting for us on expansion right now. And then she's also helping us really kick off this and manage this nutrition campaign leading up until June. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the webinar over to Melanie Vance, and she's going to give us some exciting background on this. And I just want to make one other note. This is being recorded, and what we'll try to do is make this available for anybody who did not make this tonight, and then there will be some future opportunities that Melanie will talk about for other folks to learn about the background information on the nutrition issue, but then also to do some strategizing with other results activists right around May 1st. So go ahead, Melanie.
Great. Thanks, Ken, for that introduction. Good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be on this call with you, especially given that you're calling from all over the place: California, Washington, South Carolina, Texas. It's awesome. Like Ken said, my name is Melanie, and I worked with Results from 2005 to 2009 on our Action campaign, and left to go to graduate school and then the Obama campaign, but I'm really excited to be back with Results now, helping out with these projects, especially this one, launching a new global nutrition campaign. As Ken said, it's not so new to Results. This is really fundamental to our mission and really aligns well with the campaigns that Results already is organizing around. And so I'm really excited about spending the next hour or so with you to get us all caught up to speed on what the issues are around global nutrition and how Results, through its really powerful organizing and lobbying work, can have a huge impact. So with that, I'm going to start the PowerPoint slide deck that you all see on your screen. If at any point you have any trouble hearing me or can't see the slides properly, just type a note in the chat box or feel free to interrupt. So I'm going to go ahead and start clicking through. The goals of our session tonight are just to learn about the causes and consequences of malnutrition and the scale and scope of the issues we're dealing with, share some key messaging in particular, and then do a quick preview at the end of some upcoming opportunities to scale up the fight against malnutrition. Ken mentioned that we've got a really urgent moment to leverage in the next 2 months before a big pre-G8 summit meeting in the UK in June that we hope will be a pledging moment for scaling up the resources that we know we need to fight malnutrition around the world. So just to get things going, we're going to start with a little bit of trivia. I know there's a lot of seasoned activists on the call, and so it would be great to hear sort of what you all already know about nutrition and build from that. Then we'll do some work talking about nutrition's toll, particularly among children, a bit about what the root causes are of malnutrition and the proven solutions that we know work, and then ending again with a quick preview of what our strategy is going to be for this upcoming campaign in the short term as we build out a longer term campaign to influence resources and policies around malnutrition. So to get things started, I'm going to pose a couple of questions to the group, and you can type your answers in the chat box or shout them out. So the first question is, the number of malnourished people in the world is equal to the population of the U.S., the European Union, Canada, or all of the above combined. Anyone want to take a stab at that? John Hornby saying everyone combined?
Yep.
Mm. Yep. I'll go for that.
Well, it sounds like we have some cynics on the line, but also probably some realists. So, unfortunately, the answer is all of the above combined. There's 870 million people in the world who don't have enough to eat to be healthy. So that's 1 in 8 people on the planet, which, you know, is really incredible to think about, that many people go to bed hungry every night. Second question, I'm trying to locate where all this malnutrition is happening. Which region do you think has the greatest number of hungry people? Africa, Asia and the Pacific, Latin America and the Caribbean, or the Middle East? Anyone want to take a stab at that one? John is saying Asia and Pacific.
Heidi is saying Africa.
Heidi's saying Africa. All right, this is getting interesting. Any other takers?
Asia and the Pacific.
Asia and the Pacific. Okay, so there's some consensus building there, and that is the correct answer. Asia is home to the highest numbers of people who are undernourished, but Africa is actually home to the highest rates of malnutrition. Asia's made a lot of progress, actually, in bringing down a lot of their malnutrition, and in Africa, they've made some progress, but still have a long way to go. Here's the last question of our trivia for the night. Which of the following is the #1 health risk in the world? AIDS, hunger, malaria, or tuberculosis?
Hunger.
Hunger, yeah. That's right. Hunger is it. And so, you know, hunger kills more than all 3 of these diseases combined. Obviously, they're very related. So if people are experiencing chronic or acute malnutrition, they're going to be much more susceptible to fall ill with diseases and to die from them. And as we know, that in order to treat a lot of these diseases, you have to be able to take your medicine with a full stomach. And so there's a lot of links between hunger and disease. In particular, you know, hunger really has a huge impact on children, unfortunately. And so in developing countries, 1/3 of all child deaths are linked to hunger. And so the estimates can range from 2 to 5 million to 3.5 million children dying every year of hunger, which is, you know, completely preventable. So again, just a huge, huge, huge issue. We're going to spend a little bit more time learning about what malnutrition's toll is around the world next. And so I'm just curious, who here has heard of the term stunting before?
No.
Type 1 in the chat box if you've heard of it. Heidi? Perfect. Okay. Heidi, can you I know that the answer's already probably up on the screen that you can see, but how would you describe what stunting means?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, so yeah, it is failure to achieve the growth potential for a child. So they would be smaller, weigh less than they ought to. Right.
So stunting is one of the major indicators that we can use to determine whether or not a child under 5 is undernourished. And stunting in particular means that they're short for their age. And that comes from chronic undernutrition. And so over a longer period of time, kids aren't getting the caloric intake that they need and the diets that they need in order to develop. And the word I like that you used, Heidi, was potential. So it basically stunts a child's ability to reach their full potential, both physically but also cognitively. And the damage that's done is completely irreversible. And so there's a lot a lot of good that we can do if we intervene in what is called the critical 1,000 days from the point at which a woman gets pregnant to the second year of life for a child. Stunting is a huge issue. It affects over 165 million children under 5, which is more than 1/4 of all children, which is really significant. And stunting is linked to giving kids a much higher risk of dying, again, because it really stunts their ability to develop physically. And also, it's been proven to limit a children's potential to learn and therefore stay in school, and then when they reach adulthood, to earn productively. Wasting is another major indicator that we use to determine whether or not a kid is undernourished or malnourished. And wasting technically means a low weight for height. And so this is when you're seeing all those really desperate images of kids, usually in situation where there's acute undernutrition, and so there's a famine, for instance, or there's some extended conflict in a particular area and is really inhibiting people's access to food. The consequence of wasting is really increased risk of mortality and disease. So people can be severely or moderately undernourished, and this affects 55 million children every year and increases the risk of a child dying by 9 times, which is, again, really remarkable. John in the chat box is asking to define the difference between acute and chronic. That's a great question. Acute means that generally it's a shorter term problem, and so this is brought on by unfortunate circumstances like famine, natural disasters, etc., where a child or an adult is experiencing a lack of access to nutritious food for a short period of time. Whereas chronic means that it's a longer period of time when this kid or adult is unable to access nutritious food that they need in order to continue developing and living productively. And so this affects, most of the people who are, living under $1 to $2 a day. Those people are, chronically malnourished. And, if they are living in places that are also experiencing different shocks, they will, the wasting and other impacts of that will just be exacerbated. Does anyone have any questions on this slide that summarizes malnutrition's toll on children and 2 really big ways to think about it? Any questions?
This is Beth. I do. Under stunting, it shows there's irreversible physical and cognitive damage. I'm wondering if wasting also has that impact.
That's a good question. I don't know, but usually wasting isn't described as being irreversible. So my hunch is that it's not, but I can look into that and get back to you.
Thank you.
There's a lot of treatment available for when children under 5 are experiencing acute undernutrition. And so I think the idea there is it's almost like a disease or an illness that you treat and then ensure that once, they're cured, that they continue to have access to the nutritious food that they need.
So are you saying that stunting can't be treated as well?
So stunting, the way to intervene in issues where there's stunting going on is to typically provide more nutritious food. But the damage that's done in that first 1,000 days of life, the first 1,000 days from the moment a woman gets pregnant until the child is 2 years old, that's the critical window of time that determines how much a child is going to physically and cognitively develop. And so that's why the word irreversible is used, because interventions that happen after that second year of life won't be able to increase that child's potential. And so there's a really limited window of time to make the most effective interventions. Obviously, there's still a need to intervene and make sure that these kids get the supports that they need. But in terms of preventing chronic undernutrition, that 1,000 days window is the most critical. Ken in the chat box is asking if wasting and stunting are associated with the same age group. So wasting and stunting can happen, at any point really, but typically when we talk about wasting and stunting, we're talking about children under 5 in the sense of how it's measured and how the world knows how it's doing in addressing undernutrition. Any other questions on this before we move on? No? Okay, those are some really good ones, and I'm gonna make sure that I get back to you, Beth, on your question. So just moving ahead, the next slide here just summarizes on a map sort of where the biggest issues are with stunting. And again, stunting means that children under 5 are short for their age, and that again is makes it much harder for kids to develop cognitively and physically. And while stunting prevalence has declined 40% among all kids to 30% in the last 20 years, the number of stunted children has increased by 10 million in Africa. The continent of Africa has only reduced their prevalence of stunting by about 4%, which is pretty modest. And as you can see, that's where the biggest challenges still exist and where there's a lot more work to do to really ramp up the fight against malnutrition. The reason why stunting prevalence has gone down, though, so much on a global average is mostly because of China and development there. So hopefully this gives you a better sense of just where this is all happening. The next slide talks about another type of malnutrition that isn't just about how much people are eating and can absorb those calories, but also what they're eating. And micronutrient deficiencies, particularly these critical minerals and vitamins like vitamin A, iron, iodine, and zinc, those are really crucial too for people's physical and cognitive development. And so being deficient in any one of these has really, really important effects from diminishing your immune system to leading to blindness in some instances to, again, really impairing learning and work productivity and causing anemia. So, these deficiencies in minerals and vitamins from not being able to access them in people's food or drink also have a huge impact on people's ability to lead productive lives and reach their potential. In terms of where this all comes from, the next section is about the causes of malnutrition, but also the proven solutions that we know work. And so this slide, much like a lot of the information from this PowerPoint, comes from the Scaling Up Nutrition Network, which is a relatively new political organization that tries to ramp up the political leadership as well as technical capacity to address malnutrition. And this is a slide that they show to describe 3 main causes of malnutrition and how they're all linked. And so for them, they bucket it out into 3 categories. Insufficient access to affordable and nutritious food throughout the year, lack of good care for mothers and children. And again, this is because so much of what determines how much a kid is going to be able to grow and develop is determined in that 1,000 days window. And then lastly, health, just not having access to clean and affordable sanitation and water services really also impacts a child's nutrition. All 3 of those are rooted in the political and cultural environment that people live in and whether or not they have access to services and can influence policies. Certainly poverty affects everything. The disempowerment of women in particular, just given the important role that the health of the mother and the education of the mother plays in the health status of their children. And then lastly, these are the shocks that populations and communities experience that really exacerbate all of these other drivers of malnutrition, conflict, natural disaster, climate change, et cetera. And so when thinking about what do we do about malnutrition, there's a lot of different root causes, but even though the problem is really huge in scope, we know what to do. Just to make a really important point about, why we care so much about nutrition and how it links to people's ability to develop productively, this is a slide again from Scaling Up Nutrition that shows sort of throughout the life cycle why nutrition is important. So I'm just going to read through this really quickly. But basically, when girls and women are well nourished and have healthy newborn babies, those kids are going to be much more likely to develop strong bodies and minds. they'll be able to go to school, pay attention, earn higher grades, and learn a whole lot more, enabling them to be more productive young adults who can earn more and take care of their families and their communities, and therefore emerge out of poverty. And so the idea is that nutrition is really the foundational investment for all development programs, because if kids' potential is determined in that 1,000 days period, intervening then will have a huge impact on whether or not all of our investments in education are going to be effective, whether or not our investments in economic opportunity and job growth are going to be effective, whether or not our investments in infectious diseases and other health issues are going to be effective, and et cetera. So, there's no way to accomplish all of our other development goals without really focusing in on nutrition, particularly in that 1,000-day window. Does anyone have any questions about just the critical role that nutrition plays?
Melanie, this is Lori.
Hey, Lori.
Can you tell us a little bit more about scaling up nutrition? Thank you for introducing us to them. Are they like a nonprofit working kind of on advocacy and lobbying, or are they just kind of a clearinghouse of information? What is? I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah, sure. So scaling up nutrition, or what's called SUN, is a really interesting movement that got started a couple of years ago, and their goal is really to catalyze national and global efforts to prioritize malnutrition. And so the way that it works is countries that have a high burden of malnutrition sign up to be part of the SUN network officially, and that means that they agree to come up with a national nutrition plan, devote more resources to addressing it, and take malnutrition more seriously. And there are 34 countries that have signed up to scale up nutrition, and these range from countries all over the world. It's also a way that donor governments like ours and civil society organizations and advocacy groups can also step up their involvement in addressing nutrition. And so it's a way for all these partners to sort of come together and make both political and funding progress, but also technical progress on dealing with these issues. The website for Scaling Up Nutrition, if you're interested in learning more, is scalingupnutrition.org. Does that answer your question, Lori?
Yeah, no, it does. Thanks. Thanks for introducing us to them.
Yeah, definitely. They're a really great group. So we've talked a lot about, what a big burden malnutrition is and what a huge impact it has on development. The shame of it is malnutrition is completely preventable with solutions that are basic, proven, and cost-effective. And so what this slide that you see summarized here is, again, from the Scaling Up Nutrition Network, is a list of the interventions that we know actually work and could, if scaled up, could greatly reduce the amount of kids who are suffering from stunting and wasting and micronutrient deficiency, and really help them achieve their full potential. There's two big types of categories of strategies that communities and countries can deploy to help address nutrition. There's nutrition-specific interventions, which really go at how do we increase and improve the access to food and the nutrients and minerals that they need. So those are nutrition-specific actions. So just focusing in on those, and these again are the ones that are most effective in preventing and treating malnutrition, are broken up into a few categories here. One is feeding practices and behaviors, and so we know that by encouraging exclusive breastfeeding up to 6 months of age for kids, and continuing that breastfeeding together with appropriate food up to age 2 really is a huge difference on a kid's ability to get the diet that they need. Fortification of foods with nutrients is also really important. Who here knows what is the most typical food that's fortified with a nutrient?
Salt.
It's all on our kitchen table.
Bread or like
milk?
Carbs and milk too. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, well, milk can definitely be fortified. Salt is fortified with iodine in this country and a whole lot of other countries. Iodine deficiency is a huge issue, and so there's a process that salt can be put through in order to for it to be a mechanism to get people more iodine that they need. Micronutrient supplementation is another way to address those deficiencies, and so that's directly providing extra nutrients in the form of vitamins and other supplements. And then lastly, treating acute malnutrition. So this is when people are severely or moderately malnourished, there's a treatment that can be provided to people that will help them get cured. So those are, again, very specific actions that will influence a person's ability to access a nutritious diet and get healthy and stay healthy. On the right side of the slide, you're going to see nutrition-sensitive strategies. And so those are all the ways in which we can have an impact on people's diets, but from a more macro perspective, you could say. So if you invest in helping smallholder farmers in rural India produce more food, the theory is then, right, that those families that are producing and the ones who can access the food by the market, they're going to have access to more food, and it will also increase people's income so that they can buy more food as well. Clean water and sanitation, education and employment, healthcare, and support for resilience in response to shocks are also ways in which we can help people either gain more access to nutritious diets directly or earn more so that they can then afford on a more sustainable basis nutritious food. So that's a look at what the types of approaches are for addressing malnutrition. They're often delivered in different types of programs. There's emergency programs, ones that are dealing with famines, with conflicts, with other types of natural disasters. And, you know, we all know that those are so important because time is really short and you have to be able to get people the food that they need when they need it. So that's one type of intervention, emergency programs. Another way in which some of these can be delivered is through safety net programs, and this is stuff like school feeding programs. School feeding is mainly an education intervention. It makes sure kids come to school and stay at school. But if food is given to students to bring back home to their younger siblings and to their moms and maybe their adolescent older siblings who are girls, then it can also have a huge impact on that 1,000-day window throughout the life cycle. So after emergency programs and safety net programs, you know, these are the ways in which a lot of these actions are delivered. I just want to respond real quick to a question that Heidi asked in the chat box. She wants to know, how would you compare the importance of education versus nutrition as a foundational investment for development programs? That's a great question, Heidi. So, you know, education and nutrition are obviously incredibly important for development. The reason why we say nutrition is a foundational investment is because so much of a child's learning potential is driven by their nutritional status and the nutritional status of their mother. And so by investing in nutrition up front, it enables kids to be able to learn more and stay in school for longer. And so that's why we say nutrition is a more foundational investment than education. But obviously education is critically important because kids need to be able to learn and develop and be prepared for the workforce. So it's definitely not an either or, but we are making the case that malnutrition is a really smart investment. So thanks for that helpful segue. So this slide just helps make really clear how smart it is to invest in malnutrition. So these are some statistics that you'll often hear cited and that are really good messaging to use when making the case. Nutrition investments can help break the cycle of poverty and increase a country's GDP by at least 2 to 3% annually, which is really significant when you think about how big GDP is and how hard it is to affect it and how it very rarely moves, you know, any more than certain fraction of a percent. And so, again, these nutrition investments are really critical for growth. On a more individual basis, investing $1 in nutrition can result in, on average, a $30 return in increased health, schooling, and economic productivity. Depending on where you're talking about, it can have a much bigger impact. And so the biggest number that you might see is $138. If you invest $1 in nutrition in Guatemala, for example, that's gonna bring benefits of $138 for health, schooling, and economic productivity. John is asking, does macronutrition strategy require high productive agriculture using GMO technology? That's a great question, John. So this goes to the difference between nutrition-specific and nutrition-sensitive strategies to address malnutrition. We know that right now there's enough food to feed everyone in the world, but that won't always be the case. And so we really do need to increase the productivity of our agricultural system and ensure that people actually have access to its products. I think what you're getting at is here is like, do you need genetically modified organisms, which are, some would argue, help advance that increase in output to do all this. I'm not an expert on this, but I would say that it's not required, but there is a lot of technology that's out there, both organic and otherwise, that can increase agricultural productivity. That's not the subject of what results is going to be focusing in on. We're going to be really focused in on nutrition-specific investments because we know that those are the most cost-effective and have the biggest impact on people's lives. And there's a huge funding gap for supporting them. So we'll be really focused, on that in particular. Just to wrap up the point about the, malnutrition being the best investment that we can make. In 2012, a group of economists got together called the Copenhagen Consensus, and they reviewed a lot of different ways to respond to some of the biggest challenges in the world and what is the best investments that we can make. And they looked at everything from, HIV/AIDS treatment to governance interventions to, fortifying food with micronutrients, all these things. And they agreed that fighting malnutrition should be the top priority. It was the most compelling investment that the development community could make and would have the biggest benefits for improving health, education, and productivity. So again, this is a really easy argument to make. It's obviously a huge problem, but one that we can fix, and we must. So what we're going to do is just wrap up by talking a little bit about why now. Why is this the right time to scale up nutrition and for results to get back engaged on this issue? So, over the last few years, there's been a lot of momentum building to increase the political leadership and resources for malnutrition, but we still have a really long way to go. And so what this slide that you're seeing shows is just a summary of what some of those developments are. Some of them might be familiar to you and some might be new. And so I'm just curious here, who here has heard of the Lancet? Have you guys heard of the Lancet before?
This is the other Heidi.
Hi, Heidi. Two Heidis on the phone. What are the odds?
I know it.
So it seems like some people know the Lancet. Heidi, do you want to just say what the Lancet is?
Well, it's a British medical journal.
Right. It's basically the go-to source on public health information in the world.
Which Heidi are you talking?
She's talking to the Heidi in Greenville. You're the Heidi in the Southwest, and I think I'm the Heidi in the Southeast.
Okay.
Heidi's all around. And so thanks for that, Heidi in Greenville. So the Lancet is the source on all things global health. And they came out with a series in 2008 basically making the case that malnutrition was the issue and that was the biggest public health problem that we needed to address, and generated a ton of evidence for the cost effectiveness and the impact that nutrition-specific interventions can have. And so that series that launched in 2008 really provides a lot of fuel for the fight to scale up nutrition. Then there have been a lot of political developments building on sort of all the technical developments and how we deal with malnutrition. Who here has heard of the L'Aquila Food Security Initiative? Anyone on the phone heard of that before? That one's a little bit more removed. So at the G8 Summit in 2009, the G8 leaders around the world and a lot of other governments came together and said, we want to do something about this food security and malnutrition issue. It was coming off of the food, fuel, and financial crises of 2007, 2008, and there was a lot of work to do. And so governments came and pledged to do more to address food security. And our President Obama, actually, he proposed and pledged that the U.S. would spend $3.5 billion over the course of the following 3 years to address food security. And so that was a pledge that he made at the summit and a pledge that was fulfilled last year. As part of launching this food security initiative, the world started a new multilateral funding mechanism, the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program, by which lots of different governments, hence the term multilateral, could funnel money into a glorified bank account and disperse it to countries that were trying to scale up their agriculture and food security programs. There's not currently a lot of nutrition money and specific nutrition programming coming out of this mechanism, but there's a lot of potential for it. But again, just shows that there's a lot of interest. Sort of the second row of icons you'll see on the slide are specific to what the U.S. government has been doing with the leadership of USAID and the State Department. Who here has heard of Feed the Future?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Who is that?
That was Lori. It was me.
Hey, Lori,
Hi.
thanks. Do you want to just say in a quick minute what Feed the Future is?
Do you want me to? I mean, I don't really know, but I've heard of them.
Okay, great.
Or I haven't heard of the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I'll fill in a bit. So Feed the Future is one of this administration's flagship programs, and will be the development legacy of the president. So Feed the Future is an initiative to help increase agricultural productivity around the world and address food insecurity. And they have a goal for reducing stunting as well as part of its strategy to address food insecurity issues and improve health and wellness among the poor. And so Feed the Future started a few years ago. Similar to a lot of other aid programs, it works in a very specific set of countries where it's decided it can have the most impact and there's the most political leadership on the ground. And they have a range of interventions, but it's the program, again, that our government invests a lot in and is one main mechanism in which we can really scale up the fight against nutrition because it has that mandate, but isn't yet doing all the work that it could to demonstrate that it's having an impact on nutrition. The Global Health Initiative, which you might see abbreviated as GHI, started a few years ago as well under President Bush, and this is sort of all the global health interventions that our government supports overseas, including nutrition. And the Global Health Initiative, similar to Feed the Future, is focused on a certain set of countries and also oriented toward nutrition outcomes. And so there is a really big push to scale up the work on saving mothers and saving babies as part of efforts around maternal and child health. And so there's a lot of political interest there as well, but still a long way to go to actually make sure that that means that nutrition is being funded. So that's just a quick glimpse at two of the major programs in the U.S. that we've got great opportunities around to increase and improve how they address nutrition. More recently, there have been a couple of other global developments that, again, are creating this momentum for us. One is Scaling Up Nutrition, the SUN network, and we talked a little bit earlier about that network. Another is the New Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition, and this is another G8 initiative that the U.S. is taking a lot of ownership over. But this one's more focused on the private sector and how companies and other private actors can do more to increase agricultural productivity and nutrition. And they work in a set of focused countries as well, but have a long way to go to be really focused on nutrition. Also recently, last year, the World Health Assembly, which is the governing body of the World Health Organization, came together and said, we need new targets and bolder targets for ending nutrition. And so they came up with 6 new global targets that countries agreed to try to hit by 2025. And so, as you can see, there's a lot of global momentum, a lot of technical momentum, and also, a lot of potential in the U.S. to leverage to really scale up the fight against malnutrition, especially now that we have so much evidence about the smart investments that we can make. And so, Results is taking this issue up, not just because it's core to our mission and plays a huge role in the success of our other campaigns, but because we've got a really incredible moment right now to leverage, in part because for the first time ever, there's going to be a pledging moment for nutrition. I know many of you have on the phone, and folks will be listening to this later, have been working for many years trying to ensure that other huge global health issues like AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and more recently immunizations, get fully funded. And so you all have had huge success influencing those pledging moments for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria, and Gavi. And for the first time ever this June, there could be another pledging moment for nutrition specifically at a meeting that the UK Department of International Development, the equivalent of USAID in the UK, and the Children Investment Fund, which is a foundation, are convening. They're having a meeting in London on June 8th, and they're bringing together all these governments who they're asking to make commitments for nutrition-specific and nutrition-sensitive strategies. And so we've got under 2 months to try and influence what the U.S. government might announce at that meeting, but are looking forward to putting the pressure on them to really come with a bold commitment. And so given this window of time that we've got, we've a sort of a short-term campaign timeline right now, but are going to be building out a much broader campaign. I'll let Ken, if he wants to add more to this, but I just wanted to show you a little bit about what we're trying to achieve. And then I'll just talk about some other next steps to flag. And so, and thinking about what the U.S. could and should be doing more, Results is collaborating with a whole set of organizations here in the U.S. to figure out what it makes sense for us to do that would really make a big difference. And so we've come up with 3 goals. The most important goal that our advocacy campaign in the next few months is going to be focused on is increasing the resources for nutrition. We know that it's a really smart investment, grossly underfunded. It represents less than 1% of all of our development funding, and a very small percentage of even what we're spending on global health. And so what we want to prioritize is pushing for the administration to make a 3-year pledge, which is what it's done before on similar issues, to the tune of $1.35 billion, or $450 million annually for nutrition-specific funding. Right now, the government's spending about $100 million a year on nutrition-specific funding, although it could be spending more. It's hard to tell. And so this represents essentially a tripling, but a very small percentage actually of what's needed. We'll spend a lot more talking about this in another call, but this is our biggest ask. This is what we know will make a huge difference in actually scaling up nutrition interventions around the world. Just more money is needed. Now, with that money, though, we want there to be an actual strategy. Right now, there's lots of different actors across our government that may or may not be doing work that's nutrition specific and having an impact. And so we think it's really important for the government to come up with a strategy that links all these different interventions and target populations together, and that they appoint a really high-level nutrition focal point to manage the development and execution and coordination of that strategy, as well as some more technical capacity both in the headquarters offices here, but also out in the field in the highest burden countries. The last major recommendation that our campaign is going to be focused on is really increasing the accountability and transparency within this funding. Like I mentioned before, it's really difficult right now to actually know what we're spending money on and what impact it's having. And so we believe that pushing for some more accountability and transparency with a full budget being released around nutrition and a monitoring and evaluation system that has all these different programs reporting on the same core indicators would make a really huge difference in us being able to demonstrate the real value of these investments. So those are the three big goals that our campaign right now is going to be focused on, and where you all are going to have a lot of impact once you start doing your organizing and advocacy work. Does someone have a question? No? Okay, I thought I heard something. So, this again is what we're aiming to achieve, and we're going to be using a range of different tactics and strategies over the course of the next few months and in the longer term to try to do that. And so, as we know, our biggest leverage is as constituents on members of Congress who need to support increased nutrition in sort of the annual appropriations process, but can also demonstrate to the administration that they're on board with the U.S. demonstrating its leadership by making a big pledge at this June 8th event in the UK. And so we're going to be releasing very shortly sign-on letters that members of the Senate and the House can join to the President and key people in the administration to signal that they're supportive of taking on a much more deepened, cohesive strategy on nutrition. We know that the media that you all generate in your local papers and regional papers, from op-eds, letters to the editor, and other news spots, also have a really huge impact on influencing your congressional members to, again, create the space they need to show their support to the administration, but that the administration also pays attention to that as well. And so we're going to be having some specific media campaigns, and we'll be producing, action alerts that can help you write your letters to the editors, as well as an editorial packet. And then lastly, we really want to kick things off for the longer term campaign, but sort of climax all of this capacity we've been generating on World Hunger Day 28th. And so there'll be some creative action opportunities that people can use to generate media and reach out to their elected officials that day and the lead up to it. And so that's just a really quick summary of sort of what our strategy is. As Ken mentioned, there's some other upcoming opportunities for people to learn more about both nutrition, but also to do some strategizing together. And so I'm going to pull up the dates for those, but I'm just going to ask if Ken, if you have anything that you want to add to the strategy piece before we wrap up and see what questions people have.
I think it's going to be important for all of us to make sure that we engage our other partners and activists in this, encouraging them to get the background that you got today for starters by either checking out this recording afterward or joining the next webinar, which will be on the 23rd, so next week at 9 p.m. as well. And then on May 1st, there'll be a strategizing session as well. And then some other key dates as we're leading up to this right now. And again, this campaign is pretty short leading up to June 8th. We'll have a conference call, of course, on May 11th, which will focus on this issue. We've got Mother's Day on May 12th, and so we're going to try to have an editorial packet together in advance of that, so folks can be pitching this around Mother's Day. And this nutrition theme goes very well with Mother's Day. There are some World Bank meetings for the Senate. It looks like those will focus on the Senate and the 7th. I'm not sure if we'll be able to work that in or not. But I think the key dates will be the Mother's Day and then the World Hunger Day on the 28th in terms of using some hooks out there right now around this new nutrition campaign. And again, media will be critical, and then there will be some sort of a sign-on letter that will go to the President that we'll also want to mobilize our members of Congress on.
Great, thanks for that, Ken. So this is really just the beginning of what's going to be a much longer term campaign, but as we've been discussing, there's a really urgent opportunity that we need to take advantage of in these next 6 weeks or so to ensure that the U.S. government comes with a commitment, financial and non-financial, at this meeting in London. So so with
Mel,
that, I'm just going to pause and.
Can I say one other thing, Mel?
Yeah.
This is Ken again. I wanted to point out too that this seems like it's a bit rushed and a bit there's a lot to do in a short amount of time. The primary reason for this is we've known that something's been coming for a while, but it's been really difficult to get clear on the definition of the opportunity. So really looking at working with other partners and figuring things out. We don't have all the ideal mechanisms in the world in place to move on nutrition in the way that we want to, but we're moving toward that. And so some of this stuff has been forming. There's no like global partnership for education or global fund for nutrition that is, that we can field, that we can use as in the way that we've used these other organizations for. So part of the reason that this is being introduced as it is at this particular time is just because the strategy's been in formulation and trying to figure out sort of what the best ask is and how to move the world in this direction is still kind of in a forming process.
Yeah, that's a great note to make, Ken. And we're committed to making sure that you all have the resources that you need to take all of these urgent actions. But it's really incumbent on all of us to make sure that we're engaging as many of our activists and Action Network members as possible to really maximize the opportunity that we have right now to influence Congress and the administration on such a critical issue that's getting the attention and resources that it deserves. So why don't we stop there and just see if folks have any questions first? Any questions?
This is Lori. Again, I have a question, and thanks, Ken, for that last statement. It kind of answered my question, but it still raises to me how to best sort of prove to others that this is a really, good use of our grassroots and our advocacy. Because I obviously I see that it totally is, and it seems really crucial and urgent to make sure that people know about it. But in the past, it's been really convenient, I guess, or nice to say, yeah, Gavi, we know they do a great job, and the Global Fund, they do a great job, and the Global Partnership for Education, look how this is working. And so all the pledging conferences have been, there's like this goal in mind that we're pledging to support this tried and true sort of organization, whereas right now when we say what this pledging conference, where is the money actually going and who's administering the money, I guess, and who's taking care of making sure the money goes to a place that's going to, do like what these other organizations have been doing. And so we kind of relied on that fact. Or maybe there's something that's going to come together and we're just still waiting for it. So, and then a second question I have is, do you know who's attending the conference? Like, in the past we knew that like Hillary Clinton was attending or President Obama was attending, or do we know who or maybe Rajiv Shah or somebody? Do we know who's actually attending? Thanks. Sorry for all the questioning.
No, those are great questions. Thanks, Lori. Well, Ken, feel free to jump in here, but in terms of the opportunity that we have here, this is one of what I'm sure will be many for us to influence the resources that our government, through its development assistance, can provide to improve nutrition around the world. This pledging moment represents the most urgent opportunity that we have. And it could be that for whatever reason, the world doesn't come together like it has in the past, but our role as advocates is to really push our government to step up, demonstrate its leadership and its commitment to this. Food security is one of the administration's top 3 development priorities, and it's really focused in on it. But we feel like there's just a lot more room for all those initiatives to actually directly impact nutrition, and right now it's not clear if they are, and they have the mandate to do so. this pledging conference, again, represents just sort of an opportunity that we could use to increase the government's commitment. But we know that when the rubber hits the road, the key way in which money is actually going to get to the places where it needs to go is through the appropriations process every year. But we feel like with the president having just recently fulfilled his most recent pledge on food security, that was 3 years, it's time to make another 3-year pledge, and this coincides with the remaining years of his second term, to really step up his commitment. In terms of the meeting goals and the participants, this goes to what Ken was saying earlier, that there's just been a lot of uncertainty about how this meeting is actually going to come together. But right now, there's save the dates out to mostly ministers of development, and so this would be the equivalent of our administrator for USAID, most likely. But we don't know exactly who's going, but we're hopeful that high-level representation from the U.S. will be there. The Prime Minister of the UK is expected to go, and they're working on lining up other heads of state from other countries. And so, again, this could be a really great opportunity, and we want to just create as much space as possible and pressure as possible for the administration to actually move it forward.
And I would just maybe a little response to Lori's thing is that there are plans in development, for example, under the Scaling Up Nutrition initiative, where there are countries that are formulating specific nutrition plans that can be funded. So some of the pledging dollars may go toward, much like we have for the Global Partnership for Education, funding national country plans for scaling up nutrition in this particular case. So there are targets for the work to be done. Some of it may have to be sort of like as the pledges are collected. Again, this is just a little speculation here, but this is an idea. But as the pledges are collected from the various world's resources, that we look at where those funds are targeted. And for example, on the Scaling Up Nutrition initiative, which you can find that on the web. You can see the countries and all. Certain countries will say, well, we have good bilateral partnerships with X, Y, and Z countries, and we will help them scale up their programs for these 3 countries or these 5 countries. And so then the resources would be targeted through those efforts. So it will be sort of like a not necessarily all funneled through one channel, but perhaps funneled through multiple channels, but then also really directed at very focused nutrition efforts that are being planned and put together, if that makes sense.
Lori, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, it pretty much does. Thank you. Can results as a body in our, when we help, not help, or work with, say, a member of Congress who's going to write us on a letter, can we suggest that some of these really, organizations like Scaling Up for Nutrition, this is where some of the dollars should be spent? Can we actually make those recommendations or have the member of Congress do that? Maybe that's not a question to answer right now, but just something to ponder, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, I think so while there isn't like one mechanism of funding that already exists that all this money should go through, we do have a set of interventions that through the Lancet series and other research by the World Bank and others have demonstrated are the best package of interventions. And so, in our proposal to the administration and the work that our grassroots will be doing with members of Congress, they'll be pushing for funding those specific package of nutrition interventions we know work best to address chronic and acute malnutrition, and that they be aligned with the plans that countries themselves are developing and the leadership that those countries are exhibiting. So it's a really good point, and we want to make sure that the money is being invested well, and that's why we're not just asking for more money, we're asking for an actual strategy and then the transparency and accountability to ensure that money is being spent well and that we know the impact that we're having from these investments. Any other
Great,
questions?
thank you. Yeah,
before we
thank you.
wrap
I'll stop now. Let someone else ask.
up? Thanks, Laura. These are great questions. Any other questions on the line?
Yeah, this is Katie. I'm just curious to know about the potential to partner with Food First on this, given the fact that the majority of low-income countries that have a vast majority of malnourished children actually export their food to first world countries. And I'm sorry if you already touched on this in the first half of the presentation. I came late. But Food First works a lot on making sure that low-income countries have ownership on their policies and where their food is actually going.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm glad you're thinking about what are some opportunities for partnership. I think in all of the communities in which our grassroots are organizing, there's probably lots of different organizations who really could care about this issue, even ones that are domestic focused but care a lot about kids and moms. I'm not personally familiar with Food First, but I think if they're on board with pursuing these types of goals, then it could be a really great collaboration. I think that in Feed the Future, which again is the administration's sort of flagship agricultural development and food security program, one of the types of programs that they're oriented toward is increasing productivity and helping increase trade within countries, but also across countries. And so while that specific issue is not something that Results is going to be lobbying on, there's certainly ways in which it's relevant. Any other questions or other ideas that we want to make sure we capture as we're getting things started? No?
So you said that Obama had pledged $3.5 billion for food security stuff before and had met that pledge. Is that a lot of it is agricultural?
That's a great question. Yeah, most of that money has been in agricultural development through Feed the Future, as well as emergency food aid. And so, we're really looking for the government to, really deepen its commitment to food security by scaling up the work that it's doing in nutrition explicitly. It's a great question. Any other questions or thoughts on this before we wrap up?
This is Heidi, and I do have one question, and I know it's been kind of a sore subject. I understand that there's been a disagreement, and we kind of touched on this with Tony Hall in last week's conference call about whether aid should go, our foreign aid, food aid, should go to U.S. farmers or should be funneled in the form of dollars to farmers close to the areas where the food is needed. Does this campaign have any take on that particular disagreement?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad you bring it up. So just to get everyone up to speed, the U.S. has a history of shipping a lot of food overseas to deal with emergency issues, and so subsidize U.S. farmers, and that creates a lot of inefficiency because it's more expensive to grow food here, ship it around the world, and make sure it gets to where it's needed when people are in real emergency situations. And it also has a huge impact on just the local agricultural markets when our food reaches them. And so while our campaign will not be taking a specific stance and lobbying on it, I think it's fair to say that Results is generally supportive of the food aid reform that the administration is putting forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit at odds with what Tony Hall was saying, but it's consistent with what we have kind of taken to our members of Congress before about the inefficiency and the waste of dollars in our food aid programs. Yeah,
I mean it's a huge issue and very politically sensitive, as you know, and for us, I think that there's more effective use of our grassroots time and power to lobby on the specific goals that we've laid out here, while the discussion around food aid reform continues. It's a great.
Even within Tony's organization, it sounds like there's it's not. He said they're split half and half as well, and so I mean other organizations like CARE have come down clearly on the administration side in terms of how food aid is typically one of the ways that food aid from the United States has been used is actually to sell it and then use the proceeds for development projects. CARE will no longer do that. You know, whether or not you end up in an emergency situation where regionally it's difficult to find food, like Tony said in that particular case, there was no food to be found in regionally. Well, then, of course, then it's great to be able to find food somewhere. But again, I think results really comes up more on the need for, you know, to stimulate agricultural development in those countries regionally and locally by doing most food aid purchases locally, and the UK really has done has moved to almost a 100% policy of actually using cash purchases of local and regional foods. Tony did bring up a good point about cutting those dollars, how much easier it is to cut those dollars, but I don't know that that's necessarily for us a reason to not support local and regional purchasing versus shipping U.S. crops.
Thanks, Ken. Again, these are all great questions. I just want to be really sensitive to time because I know that you all are joining this call in your evenings, and it's getting late in the day for our East Coast folks. Any final questions or thoughts? All right. Well, first, thank you so much again for joining us tonight. It was a real pleasure to talk with you all and hear about all that you already know about nutrition and get some really smart questions to deepen our understanding of not just the problem, but the real easiness of the solutions that if our government and others put more money into would make a really huge difference in people's lives. Second is that you're going to be hearing more from results about the next steps that you can take to advance this campaign. There's going to be a set of resources available as well as another call that will be focused on strategy and what specifically we're asking our grassroots groups to do. And that call will be on May 1st. And for your friends and activists and Action Network members who weren't able to join this call, we're going to be putting out a recording of this, the PowerPoint that you see here, and holding the same session on the 23rd next week. And so look forward to hopefully engaging more of your partners in this work. Thanks so much again for all of your time, and we're really looking forward to kicking this campaign off with all of your help. So thanks. Have a good night and take care.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you so much again. Bye.